Felicitous greetings, fellow fanatics.
Happy New Year, everyone! I'm Fanatic, and today we're taking a look at the Mega Man NES Hexalogy, a series of classic run-and-gun platformers by Capcom. Before we get started though, what's your favorite platformer on the NES? Let me know in the comments, and then let's dive in. First released in 1987, Mega Man, known as Rockman in the original Japanese, didn't make many waves when it first came out. However, the development team was adamant about releasing a sequel, so much so that they told Capcom they'd do it in their spare time at work. Mega Man 2 came out only a year later in 1988 to much wider critical acclaim. Although no Mega Man title released in '89, after that, Capcom really went into overdrive with the series, churning out 3, 4, 5, and 6 all in the span of 4 years. And on top of that, it also had a board game style spin-off and 4 Game Boy titles in that same time span. Needless to say, Capcom found a formula that worked and really ran with it. So, what was the formula? Firstly, they were fairly difficult run-and-gun platformers. That part wasn't too unusual. What was unusual for games at the time was that you could do the first set of levels in any order you chose. With the first game, you had 6 bosses you could choose to face off against in any order, whereas later entries raised this to 8. What really makes Mega Man stand out is the way he grows in power with each enemy he defeats. Upon clearing a level, you get a special attack from that boss. This plays into the double pun of Rockman. On one level, it's simply a music pun, as many of the characters are named after musical terms in the series. Rock and roll, gospel and forte, blues, beat. There's a lot of characters that play into this, although not all of them maintain these puns in English. The other level of pun is that Rockman is supposed to be reminiscent of rock, paper, scissors. Each boss in the game is weak to another boss's special weapon. So to take the original game for example, I typically start my runs by going after Bomb Man. Defeating him grants you the Hyper Bomb, which Guts Man is weak to. In turn, this grants you the Super Arm, which Cut Man is weak to. Rinse and repeat, and eventually we come to Fireman, whose Firestorm is Bomb Man's weakness. Along the way, you'll also obtain other items such as the Magnet Beam or the Super Arrow, which are more used to help you traverse stages rather than to actually fight. For the most part, these were later replaced by Mega Man's trusty canine companion, Rush. But that's not a hard rule. First introduced in Mega Man 3, the robotic dog quickly became a staple of the series and even led to some shmup stages in 8, but more on that when we're actually reviewing it. Once you've defeated all the robot masters, you'll head into the final gauntlet of stages. These typically involve storming Dr. Wily's castle, but there may be something else you have to do along the way. These are done in a more traditional manner, as there's no stage select here. You just go through them in a set order and defeat each of the bosses along the way. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the boss rushes. Many games have a boss rush mode, but in Mega Man, they're actually part of the main game. Although the rules were a little different for the first game, from the second onwards you'd enter a room with a bunch of teleporters, fight each of the robot masters once again, get a large health refill upon defeating one, and have to do this with all 8 of them without using any continues. Sometimes the boss rooms would be a little different from their first fight, and you had the advantage of having all your abilities from earlier in the game to make these fights a little easier this time around. So now, let's briefly take a look at each individual game. The original Mega Man is shorter than the rest of the series, with only 6 robot masters instead of the 8 that would become standard. Although not a bad game, it is rather rough around the edges. There's just a general lack of polish in the stage design, and there was no way to continue your game after shutting it off. Later titles would include a password system to remedy this. There's also the fact that it's entirely possible to miss the Magnet Beam in Elecman's stage, which is required to beat the first stage of Wily's castle. Story really isn't the classic series' strong suit. They are 90s platformers after all. Dr. Wily has stolen and reprogrammed 6 of Dr. Light's industrial robots. As a lab assistant model, Rock volunteers to be upgraded into a combat robot to stop them, and once his brothers have been subdued, he presses on to face Wily himself. The end. Although it set the stage for many classics to come, it really hasn't weathered the years as well as its successors, and I find it to be worthy of a lacking 6.8 out of 10, but I still recommend it to those who want to experience a piece of video game history. On to Mega Man 2, known as Rockman 2, The Secret of Dr. Wily in Japan, this is many players' favorite. And don't get me wrong, I still enjoy it, but I still feel like the series was finding its footing here. Many players speak fondly of the Metal Blade, a weapon which can be used in many situations, but is that really a good thing? It feels like it sort of defeats the purpose of collecting all these weapons if you're just going to be using the same one for almost the entire game. And then there's the infamous Boo Beam Trap boss near the end of the game. This boss isn't particularly difficult when you know what to do, but it relies on going into the fight with a full stock of the Crash Bomber. You need to fire exactly 7 times to defeat it. If you miss even once, there's no way to refill your weapon energy. If you die to the boss, you're going to have to spend time farming, as said weapon energy does not refill upon losing a life, only upon getting a game over and choosing to continue. This is something that I'd consider a design flaw of the entire series on NES, but nowhere does it hit harder than with this boss fight. Another couple things to note, as Mega Man defeats bosses, he'll sometimes get an item from Dr. Light to help him traverse future stages. Also, this title introduced E-Tanks. Pick one of these up, and you can save it for a difficult fight, allowing you to completely restore your health in the middle of a level or even during a boss fight. As for the story, after Dr. Wily's defeat, he creates 8 robots for the sole purpose of exacting revenge upon Mega Man. What's the big secret he's hiding? He's actually an alien. Only, he's not. It's actually just another machine he built to fight Mega Man. While it's not as rough as the first game, 2 still has a number of weaknesses that I felt would be improved as the series went on, and I find it worthy of a solid 7.1 out of 10. Next we have Mega Man 3, known as Rockman 3, the end of Dr. Wily in Japan. As aforementioned, this introduced Rush to the series, and right out of the gate, Mega Man will have access to the Rush Coil, which allows him to make a high jump. Additionally, he'll also gain access to the Rush Jet to fly and the Rush Marine to traverse water as the game goes on. Once you've defeated all 8 Robot Masters, you'll have to face off against Doc Robot in 4 remix stages, each of which has him using the powers of 2 of the bosses from Mega Man 2. But arguably the biggest change this game brought to the series was the introduction of the slide. By holding down and pressing the jump button, Mega Man will perform a slide which gives him a short boost of speed and allows him to slip under some attacks. As for the story, Dr. Wily claims to have reformed his ways. In order to build a peacekeeping robot, he needs elements from 8 different planets.
Really? No one questions this? Mega Man, Dr. Light, Roll, they're all this gullible?
Apparently they are, because Mega Man indeed goes to all 8 planets to collect the various materials needed. And, this is going to absolutely shock you, Dr. Wily betrays them after all the elements are collected. No, I am not giving a spoiler warning for that, it does not deserve it. Along the way, Mega Man faces off against his prototype, Proto Man, who seems to more want to train him rather than actually hurt him. Indeed, when Wily's castle starts to self-destruct, he carries Mega Man away to safety. This title was a major jump forward for the series, not only because the level design was cleaner than previous titles, the slide really does add a lot to it. It's a true classic that still holds up well to this day, worthy of a respectable 8.3 out of 10. On to Mega Man 4, or Rockman 4, A New Evil Ambition in Japan. The only major change this game brought is the Mega Buster, an upgraded version of Mega Man's basic attack that lets him charge it up before firing for extra damage. Despite not being very different, this one just feels really well polished. By this point, the devs really knew what they wanted to do with the series, and it shows. This time around, it's not Dr. Wily that's threatening the world, but Dr. Kozak. Only, once he's defeated, it turns out that he was forced into fighting as Dr. Wily captured and threatened his daughter. So of course, you still have to fight Wily yet again once she's safe. Despite being little different from previous games, 4 just feels very finely tuned, and I find it to be worthy of a respectable 8.7 out of 10. Mega Man 5, known as Rockman 5 Blues Trap in Japan, really didn't change much at all, even in comparison with the jump from 3 to 4. It provided another solid title, with the biggest addition being these emblems you can collect in the first 8 stages. Get all of them, and you'll be able to call on Mega Man's newest ally, Beat the Robotic Bird. Beat will automatically home in on enemies and attack them, and is actually extremely useful against some of the later bosses in the game. The Charge Shot also saw a significant improvement, and honestly was a little too good this time around. Story-wise, this time it's Proto Man on the attack, leading his own army of robots. Only, it's not actually Proto Man, but a fake built by Dr. Wily, because of course it is. Were you really expecting any differently at this point? Still a great game, but a small step down from the previous entry. I find it to be worthy of a respectable 8.4 out of 10. Then finally, we have Mega Man 6, known as Rockman 6, the greatest battle of all time in Japan. This one tried to change things up by having Rush act as armor for Mega Man in 2 configurations. In power configuration, Mega Man loses range but can charge up a powerful, short-range blast that can break through armored enemies and shatter obstacles. Meanwhile, Jet configuration gives up power for agility, allowing you to fly for a brief period of time, but removing your ability to perform a charge shot. Beyond that, both of these armors sacrifice your ability to slide, but they open up alternate routes. This time around, half of the stages will have 2 separate exits. If you use the alternate exit, you'll gain an emblem. Collect all 4 and you'll have access to Beat once again, though he's not as useful this time around as all bosses are completely immune to his attacks. As for the story, a multinational robot competition has been held, but the mysterious Dr. X takes control of them and reveals that he's been the one behind Dr. Wily's schemes. And really, do I even need to say it at this point? Bugs Bunny dressed as a woman is more convincing than this. But yes, it really is that obvious. Mr. X is just Dr. Wily in disguise. However, in what is a genuine surprise, Mega Man actually manages to apprehend the Mad Doctor this time around and throw him in jail. Was I expecting any sort of great story? No, of course not, but it really doesn't even try. Still, the gameplay isn't bad, albeit the level designs do feel somewhat lazy compared to the previous games. It's still a fun title, but definitely took a few steps back overall. In conclusion, I find it to be worthy of a solid 7.5 out of 10.
If you're interested in playing these titles yourself, the easiest way to do so these days is probably with the Mega Man Legacy Collection, which is currently available for all major consoles as well as PC. However, my personal preference is actually to play them through the Anniversary Collection, which is available for the GameCube and PS2. If you still have a console that will play it, it's not particularly expensive to grab secondhand. Of course, if you want to play the games on the original NES hardware, then you're going to have to shell out some serious cash. But what about you? What do you think of the first 6 Mega Man games? Which of the Hexalogy is your favorite? If you have any questions, remarks, or opposing points of view, leave them in the comments down below. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and ring that bell. If you really enjoy my work, please consider funding my channel on Patreon. Until next time, farewell, fellow fanatics. Thank you again for watching. I have plenty more to share with you if you're interested. You can click up here above my head to subscribe to my channel. You can click over here on my monitor to see the most recent video that I've worked on. Or if you prefer, you can click up here to open this mysterious vault and see what video that the YouTube algorithm has picked just for you.